And good morning. It is April 8th, 2020, and it's time for our daily briefing on the news. What's happening in the news? Well, first, let me just go through the coronavirus's latest numbers. Worldwide, there's about 1,400,000 people who have the virus. And in the United States, it's 388,000. That was as of last night. There might be updated figures. Let's just check. Um, and of course, my phone doesn't work as quick as I want it to. Okay, here we go. In the United States, there are 401,000 people here in the United States with it. We are number one in the world in terms of having the most cases of the coronavirus. It has hit the United States harder than it's hit any other country. I have to add a word of caution. There's some questions whether the Chinese and the Iranians are honest in their reporting, whether they're reporting the full extent. But in terms of what we know, the United States has more than anyone else. Here in the state of Texas, there are 8,262 cases. Of course, one of the realities we have to deal with is that Texas is not testing too much. And the amount of testing done here, we're the second largest state in terms of population, but we're way down on the list in terms of actually testing for it. And it's simply the state, the federal government has not made the resources available for Texans to get tested as they are in other places. There's a sense that as those resources come to us, as they leave New York and some of the harder hit areas and they come to Texas, we're going to see the numbers of cases here in Texas going way up. And the belief is that the number of cases in Texas will reach a peak in May or possibly June. Okay. 80,000, 81,000 people have died worldwide from this. Uh, in the United States, 12,000 people have died. Here in Texas, 154 people have died. In Abilene, city of Abilene, there are 38 people who are confirmed to have tested positive for the virus. And there's been about 700 people have been tested, and we're still waiting for the results of 112 of them. What's really interesting about the testing numbers here is there's actually more people in the 20 to 29 age group. There's 10 here in Abilene who have the disease, and that's a higher number than any of the other age brackets. So you divide age by 10 years, so people in their teens, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. The highest number of cases are actually those in the 20s, in their 20s. And that's unlike what you see in most other places. Why that is, nobody knows at this point. Okay, um, let's see. Do want to point out that the University of Washington is predicting the number of people who will die from this disease in the United States. And their prediction is by the end of the summer, there will be about 60,000 people who will have died from this disease. Now, 60,000 people is a lot of people. That's about half the population of Abilene. What's interesting is that a week ago, they were saying there was going to be 91,000 people who were going to die. But what's going on is that we are social distancing. That's why I'm talking to you via computer. But we are social distancing. A lot of people are wearing masks. Most people are staying home, or at least staying home a lot more than what they used to. I was just reading that McDonald's sales are way down this quarter, and that's because people aren't going out. Okay, because people aren't going out, we're not spreading the disease. So as a consequence, the number of people who are getting the disease, the number of people who are dying from the disease is expected to lessen. So 60,000 people are expected to die from this disease by late summer. Now, look at it this way. We've only lost 12,000 people. So that means another 38,000 people. Did I do my math right? 48,000 people are going to be dying from this virus in the next several months. And that's just a devastating toll. If you look at it on a daily basis, yesterday, 1,858 people died in the United States from this virus. That made it yesterday the most common cause of death, more common than heart attacks, more common than cancer. It's the #1 killer yesterday. Okay, and it will be today. Deaths from this coronavirus are expected to reach their peak this weekend. And then they're supposed to gradually sort of start to decline. But that decline will continue for the next 5 months or so. And there's some talk about after we go through all this, we get back to our activities in the fall, come November and December, there will be another round of this disease. And those who didn't get it the first time are going to be susceptible the second time. That's the way it goes. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the economy. Again, we began the semester, the economy was in marvelous shape, the best in 50 years. Marvelous time to go get a job, that sort of stuff. That has all changed. The economy now is in deep trouble. Congress and the president have already passed and signed this $2.2 trillion rescue package. And what happened yesterday? The White House sent to the Senate another rescue package. It's going to be called Phase 4. And this is simply for small businesses to get loans to help tide them through this rough period. And what that is asking for is $251 billion. So $2.2 trillion, and now you add to that $251 billion added together. And that's in the matter of weeks what we're spending trying to stop the economy from going into a depression. In a depression, the economy contracts. The economy gets smaller. The number of people unemployed increases. What they're talking about right now, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, she yesterday came out and said she anticipates that the unemployment rate today is 13%. 13% of the country is out of work. And what was it, a month ago? 3.5%. This has been devastating. Also came the news that mortgage applications, in other words, people want to buy a house, so you need to get a mortgage. That's down 18% from a year ago. In other words, the mortgages, people looking to move, people looking to buy, is basically frozen. The housing market is basically frozen. Let's see. Interesting poll. We talked about polls all through class. Interesting poll came out. Americans were asked, who do you want as your leader during this time? And what this poll, this Politico Morning Consult poll, what it showed is that Americans believe that President Obama would have been the best leader during this time of crisis. He would be better than Donald Trump, but Americans also believe that Donald Trump is a better leader during this crisis than Joe Biden. Joe Biden is basically locked away in his house. He has a basement studio set up where he does podcasting and TV interviews, that sort of thing. But, he's basically a non-entity right now in the political world. It's all Donald Trump all the time. And seeing that has caused a lot of people to wish it was Barack Obama. Also, going back to coronavirus, disturbing information that's coming out. As we have a chance to study it more, what we see is that there's what we call a racial disparity. Looking at the people who are infected by the coronavirus and those who die because of the coronavirus it shows that there is a higher proportion of African Americans who are getting the disease and dying of the disease than would be expected from that percent of the population. You look at what's going on in Michigan and New Orleans as prime examples of that. You look at my old hometown, Albany, Georgia, and South Georgia. African Americans make up, let's say in Albany, Georgia, they make up 50% of the patients there, but 70% of the victims of this are African American. Why that is, we don't know at this time. That's just something that's going to have to be looked at, and something that is very, very disturbing. Final thing I want to bring up today. Yesterday was a really rough day in the Trump administration. There's been all sorts of personnel changeover. There's a new chief of staff, Mark Meadows, former congressman. He quit being a member of Congress from North Carolina to become the White House chief of staff. In other words, the number 2 person in the White House in terms of running the White House. So he's it. And he came in and he instituted some changes. Number 1, the Inspector General, the man who's responsible for making sure the money's spent correctly, the Inspector General of the Intelligence Services was fired. Then the Inspector General of the Pentagon was fired. And he was fired just as he was taking over the job of being the Inspector General of all of that $2 trillion that's supposed to be spent on stimulus money. He was fired. So he can't do that. And the president appointed someone that he knows, the Inspector General of the Environmental Protection Agency, to watch over all the money. So there's questions being raised about whether that Inspector General is really independent or not. So also, the press secretary to the president was moved out of working for the president. Now she is working for the First Lady. She'll be the chief of staff for the First Lady. And there'll be a new person who will be the press secretary for the president. The reality is every day the president has his own press conferences. He loves to have his own press conferences where he talks about the coronavirus and then goes and talks about other things. So those are going to continue because they are serving as campaign rallies for the president at this time. And the final thing was that the acting Secretary of the Navy resigned yesterday. And, we talked about it before. USS Theodore Roosevelt had all sorts of coronavirus cases. The captain pleaded with higher ups, I need to find a place to put all these sailors who are experiencing the coronavirus. I can't put them in quarantine on this ship. There's no place to put them. Please help me. That letter that he sent, that email went public. He was fired by the acting Secretary of the Navy. The acting Secretary of the Navy then went out and addressed the sailors in the coronavirus, in the USS Theodore Roosevelt. And what did he do when he's there? He criticized their old captain and he cussed him out. Okay, it was what they call a profanity-laced tirade. Okay, then that became public. He apologized, and yesterday he turned in his resignation letter, and it was accepted. So he's out. Just a tumultuous day in Washington, D.C. Okay, so that's it for April 8th. Who knows what's going to happen beyond that? I hope you're all taking care and being safe. Talk to you later.